Some of the most beloved faces in Korea have played the perfect lover 100 times over. And yet, in real life, every one of them is single. Today, they're the stars millions of us grew up swooning over, and every one of these 18 actors reached their 40s, their 50s, and beyond, still gloriously, unapologetically single. We're counting down from 18 to 1, and the higher we climb, the longer they've stayed unattached, all the way to the legend who built her whole life without a wedding and wouldn't have it any other way. But first, an actor whose leading men never hold back when it comes to love.
곱게 체포될 생각은 버려, 406. 넌 반드시 내 손으로 잡는다.
For an actor whose leading men only seem to know one setting, love completely with no half measures, it's almost funny how little the world knows about his own heart. At 42, Yoo Yeon-seok is the youngest name here, and one of the most charming romantic leads working today. Off-screen, though, there's mostly silence. He almost never speaks about dating and rarely confirms a thing. But he hasn't given up on love. In early 2025, he finally opened up, saying plainly that he isn't opposed to marriage in the slightest. He simply hasn't found the right person. And his ideal type isn't about looks or fame or anything you'd expect. It's communication. Someone he can talk to easily, and he was quick to add that he'd have to be the best communicator himself. There's something lovely about that. Coming from him, he spent a decade playing men who say the thing, who close the distance. And what he's actually waiting for isn't a grand romance. It's a conversation that flows. Here's hoping he finds her. Yoo Yeon-seok keeps the world guessing. This next actor has kept it guessing for so long, he's practically a permanent fixture on every eligible bachelor list in the country. And by every sign, that isn't changing anytime soon.
도망갈 거 알았으니까 그렇게 막 뒤에서 껴안을 줄은 몰랐고.
아니 왜 나랑 같이 점심 먹고 싶은 건데 왜?
궁금하니까.
뭐가요?
그날 교무실에서 나한테 왜 그랬는지 들어야겠습니다, 난.
At 44, Ji-hoon is everywhere. The commanding presence behind Kingdom and Jirisan, and this year alone, he's led the political thriller Climax opposite Ha Ji-won and the romance Love Your Enemy with Jung Yoo-mi. The man does not stop working, and when he's asked about marriage, he doesn't dodge. He's admitted plainly that he's genuinely worried about it. Not opposed, worried. Because he puts the work ahead of starting a family, and he knows a schedule like his isn't suited to that kind of commitment. He's had exactly one public relationship with singer Seung-heon back in the 2010s. Since then, nothing. Not a confirmation, not a hint. And maybe that's the answer right there. Once you've had your love life play out in front of an entire country, keeping the next one to yourself starts to look less like secrecy and more like self-preservation. Ji-hoon's fans are still waiting on him. This next leading lady has kept them waiting just as long and seems perfectly content on her own.
사진보다 실물이 훨씬 더 잘생겼다고. 사진도 마음에 들어서 나온 걸 텐데 그거보다 실물이 더 잘생겼다니 그러면 내가 너무 불안해지잖아요. 앞으로 이렇게 잘생긴 얼굴로 여자들 마음 막 훔치고 다닐까 봐.
Yoo In-na, also 44, has been one of the industry's most beloved leading ladies since Goblin, warm, and effortlessly charming across a long line of rom-coms. She keeps her romantic life quiet and her career front and center, and has never once treated a wedding as the thing she's missing. There's the running joke, of course. A corner of the fandom decided long ago she should marry her Goblin co-star Lee Dong-wook, and their chemistry sent the internet into a frenzy more than once. But the two have always said the same thing: close friends, nothing more. She said she'd marry if the right person came along. She just doesn't believe in marrying for the sake of marrying. And she once offered a different explanation entirely, half joking that she might never marry at all, and that it would be IU's fault. The two are famously inseparable. Make of that what you will. Ship or no ship, she seems cheerfully happy exactly where she is. And whoever she eventually chooses, if she chooses anyone at all, is going to be very lucky. Yoo In-na waves off the marriage question with a laugh. This next actor has spent his career playing men who fall impossibly, eternally in love, and has spent his real life explaining patiently and repeatedly why he hasn't.
1월 초다세, 사수자리, A병, 미혼, 집은 전세, 차는 필요하면 곧, 과거 깔끔, 명함은 아직 보고 싶었어요.
Because Lee Dong-wook has become, in his fans' words, the patron saint of single people. When he gave some blunt dating advice on a talk show last year, the internet crowned him president of the Singles Only Club, and people started posting that they weren't losers. They were simply following Dong-wook's advice. He's earned it. Promoting Single in Seoul, a film about, of all things, a man perfectly happy living alone. He was asked yet again why he hasn't settled down. He said he's become too comfortable being alone. He's used to it now, and he's sure it'll work out. Then he went further. And this is the part that stayed with me. He does want to get married, he said. He just doesn't think it'll be soon. Because when he asks himself whether he could actually fulfill his role as part of a family, he isn't sure. That's a startlingly honest thing for a leading man to say out loud, and he's never softened it. He's also got a sense of humor about it. On the same promotional run, he announced that his love cells were dying, having scored badly on a love cell test on a film program, and joked he was rehabilitating himself with the movie. But underneath the jokes, there's a line that lands differently. I'm waiting for a good person to come along someday. He hasn't ruled it out. He isn't in a hurry. And as he once put it, the loneliness comes sometimes, but it never lasts very long. Lee Dong-wook may be Korea's most famous bachelor, but he isn't even the only one in his own friend group. His best friend, born the very same year, is right here beside him.
용기가 안 났어. 혹시라도 네가 날 보게 되면 내가 마음에 안 들 수도 있겠다 싶어서.
Yoo In-seok, who turned 45 just days ago, is every bit as private about romance as the man he calls one of his closest friends. He belongs to one of Korea's most famous actor circles. 9 of them, no official name, with his own home as the usual gathering place. Kim Woo-bin, Song Joong-ki, Lee Kwang-soo, Cha Tae-hyun, and EXO's D.O. among them. For years, fans joked the whole crew was contentedly single together. That joke has aged badly. Song Joong-ki married in 2023. Kim Woo-bin married Shin Min-ah at the end of 2025. After 11 years together, Lee Kwang-soo has been with Lee Sun-bin for a decade and counting. One by one, they've paired off, and Yoo In-seok is still the one holding the title. And what makes his silence interesting, rather than simply private, is this. He has said, on television, that he'd like to marry and described his ideal partner as a gentle woman. So this isn't a man who ruled it out. When a rumor in 2023 tried to pair him off, his agency shut it down flatly. Not true, not even dating. He wants it. He just hasn't found it, and he's never pretended otherwise. Yoo In-seok keeps his private life quietly off screen. This top star did the exact opposite. She lived hers in front of the entire world and came out the other side entirely on her own.
그래요. 썸 타는 사이로 다시 만난 걸로 해요, 우리.
Song Hye-kyo, 44, has loved publicly 3 times in 3 of the most followed relationships in K-drama history. Lee Byung-hun, Hyun-bin, and then Song Joong-ki in a wedding fans called a fairy tale and a divorce 2 years later that her agency put down to differences in personality and values. Neither of them ever said more, and they were entitled not to. And here's where all 3 of them ended up. Lee Byung-hun married in 2013, Hyun-bin married in 2022, Song Joong-ki married in 2023. Every man she has publicly loved is now settled, with a family of his own. She's the only one who isn't. Which sounds like the sad ending, except she's spent her 40s telling us the exact opposite. She poured herself into the work and delivered some of the biggest hits of her career. She said she isn't afraid of growing older, that she spent years putting everyone else's opinions ahead of her own, and that she's finally turned towards simply loving her own life. 3 of the most watched relationships in the country, and the person who came out of them with the clearest sense of what she actually wants was her. Song Hye-kyo rebuilt her life in the open. This intensely private actor has never let us see his at all.
미안해요. 의뢰인이 누군지 몰랐지만 그렇게라도 문주 씨를 지키고 싶었어요.
그날 밤에 내가 어떤 사람인지 알게 됐어요.
Kang Dong-won, 45, is the poster child for being simply too effortlessly cool to sit still long enough to get married. He's been melting hearts since the early 2000s, and that art house cool charm hasn't faded an inch. But he did once explain himself, and the answer is quietly revealing. It isn't that he doesn't want to marry, he said. It's that marriage feels burdensome because a person has to prepare an enormous amount before taking that step. Which is the opposite of indifference, a man daunted by the idea precisely because he takes it seriously. And the irony fans love is that he's wonderful with children, so warm toward young actors on set, they've nicknamed him the perfect future father. His reason for that is disarming too. Life will hurt them eventually, and he doesn't want their earliest memories of this work to be bad ones, which rather suggests he'd be marvelous at the whole thing, if he ever decides he's prepared enough. Kang Dong-won keeps his love life a closed book. This famously guarded actress keeps hers just as shut and refuses to apologize for the silence.
짐작하기 어렵지. 10년을 걸려 쓴 논문이 작은 결함 하나 때문에 허사가 되고 그 결함을 채우려고 몇 년을 더 보내다 보면 어떤 마음이 들지.
Im Soo-jung, 47, has sat quietly on still single lists for 2 decades, and she has never once explained herself. She doesn't have to. Indelible ever since A Tale of Two Sisters, she's one of the most guarded actresses of her generation. She's been linked here and there over the years, but she's confirmed virtually nothing and she's never married. She simply keeps her romantic life out of the press entirely, letting her filmography do the defining instead of her relationship status. The result is a career full of unforgettable roles, and a private life that stays, by her own careful design, a genuine mystery. Though she did explain herself once, and it's worth hearing. She has never thought of herself as anti-marriage, she said. She never decided against it. She simply never went chasing someone just to get it done. Her friends dreamed of marrying young and building families, and she says she has never once thought that way. But she'd like to share a life with someone eventually, because she doesn't want to grow old alone. She's just waiting for it to happen naturally, and she is in absolutely no hurry. Im Soo-jung says nothing at all. This popular leading man, for once, said quite a lot, and his answer might be the most revealing here.
적인 힘에는 예의가 필요한 거야. 정 그래도 원한다면.
다 됐거든요. 어차피 뭐 다 아는 문제일 텐데.
오.
Over 20 years in the industry, linked to some of the most beautiful actresses in Korea, and confirmed relationships? 0. Not one. In more than 2 decades, Gong Yoo has never once confirmed a single relationship. And at 47, it rather looks like he's decided to keep it that way. He's had multiple dating relationships with his co-actors, Im Soo-jung, Jung Yoo-mi, Kim Go-eun. The rumors have swirled around all of them, and he's never fed the fire once. But he did eventually explain himself. In a 2024 interview, he said plainly that he doesn't think marriage is a given, that even in his mid-40s, he simply doesn't see a definitive answer, and that it's a personal choice for everyone. For some of these women, staying single isn't a circumstance at all. It's a choice they'll happily tell you about.
너한테 중요한 일인 거 알겠는데 내 생각해서 묻어줬으면 좋겠어.
Ha Ji-won, 48, is one of the highest paid actresses Korea has ever produced, and marriage has simply never been on the list. She's the rare lead who can cry her way through a sweeping melodrama one year and throw herself into her own action stunts the next. A genuine do-it-all, and famously one of the hardest workers in the business. Through all of it, the work has come first, and she carries that with an easy, unbothered confidence. Ha Ji-won never chased the title of wife. This former beauty queen already held a very different title, and still never made a beeline for the altar.
불편하신 자리면 그만 일어나셔도 괜찮아요. 양가 어른들께는 각자.
이 자리가 불편한 자리입니까?
아닌가요? 일반인들보다 많은 걸 누리고 사는 만큼.
Kim Sa-rang, 48, was once literally crowned the most beautiful woman in the country. She took the Miss Korea crown back in the year 2000, then turned that spotlight into a long, steady screen career in dramas like Secret Garden. And for all those years in the public eye, she stayed single and refreshingly low-key about the whole subject, which is its own kind of answer. Most stars eventually get cornered into justifying why they haven't married. Kim Sa-rang just declined to participate in that conversation at all. Kim Sa-rang's reason is simply that she never rushed. This veteran actress has perhaps the most disarming reason of all, because there really isn't a dramatic one.
근데 선생님, 이게 그렇게 쉽게 결정할 일은 아니에요. 중개를 하면 선생님뿐만이 아니라 선생님 가족 모두가 다 신상이 알려질 수도 있고요.
만약에 진짜면요?
Kim Hyun-joo, 49, is the rare case where the honest answer is just that nothing dramatic ever happened. She's a true veteran, a career stretching from 90s melodramas all the way to the gripping thrillers she's known for now, like Hellbound. Through all of it, she's kept the spotlight on the work and off her private life, and she's never made some grand declaration about staying single. She's simply lived it. No agency statement, no headline breakup, no declaration either way. Just a career she kept building while the question of marriage quietly never came up. Sometimes the reason really is that undramatic. A woman who loves the job and never once felt she was missing a thing. Kim Hyun-joo never made a declaration about any of it. This original heartthrob has been quietly waiting for something specific. And he'll tell you exactly what.
까먹었어요? 아니 뭐 나 놀리는 거예요? 그것도 아니면 뭐 신종 사기 뭐 이런 건가?
아니 그래도 뭔가 좀 익숙하다거나 아니면 뭐 필이 온다거나 아니면 가족 같다거나.
Seung-heon, at 49, is closing in on 50, and one of the 2000's very first heartthrobs is somehow still a bachelor. He has a face that defined an entire era of Korean romance, which makes it almost funny that his own love life has stayed so quiet. He's been linked to co-stars across the decades, but nothing ever led to a wedding. His explanation comes down to timing, the right person at the right moment, rather than marrying to tick a box. 30 years into his career, he's still waiting for it to line up, and seems entirely at peace with that, which is the healthiest possible answer. And here's hoping the timing finally cooperates. Seung-heon is still waiting for the timing. This top actress stopped waiting for anyone's timing but her own a long time ago.
철저히 엄수한다는 원칙이 조항에 있지 않아요? 계약 위반하셨어요, 주집사님.
죄송해요.
그 아파트 돌려주셔야겠네요.
Kim Soo-hyung, 52, never once tried to fit the mold, which is exactly why she became a star. She stole every scene she touched in Sky Castle and Mine, and she came to that fame remarkably late. Nearly 25 years in supporting and villain roles before Sky Castle made her a household name at 45. She's spoken openly about building a life entirely on her own terms, rather than following anyone's timeline. And she's never been coy about why. She said she already married her job and has no plans to marry anyone else, because she wants to focus on loving herself more deeply. She's drawn to roles most of her peers wouldn't touch, too. All of it adds up to one of the most magnetic, singular actresses in the business. A woman completely at ease being exactly who she is, with or without a ring. Kim Soo-hyung built her life on her own terms. This next leading man built his around one person. He just never made it official.
지금부터 제가 하는 말 잘 들으세요. 이건 그냥 게임이 아닙니다. 게임을 하다 걸리면 죽습니다.
Lee Jung-jae, 53, has never married, and yet he's been devoted to the same woman for a decade. The Emmy-winning global icon of Squid Game is technically single, because he and his longtime partner have simply chosen never to formalize it. That partner is Im Se-ryung, vice chairwoman of a major Korean conglomerate. They've been together since around 2015, walking red carpets from Cannes to the Emmys side by side. Their pairing raised eyebrows at first. A top actor beside a conglomerate heiress was tabloid catnip, but the two have simply carried on, unbothered year after year. Given the complicated dynamics of a high-profile chaebol family, where marriage can mean tangled questions of inheritance and control, staying unmarried may be less a romantic statement than a practical one. Either way, he and Im Se-ryung seem perfectly content to stay exactly as they are. A committed couple, no certificate required. Proof that single doesn't always mean alone. Lee Jung-jae never needed a wedding to be committed. This next actress never needed a partner to feel complete. And she'll tell you so without a flicker of doubt.
뭐라고요? 왜 안 된다고요?
그 룸은 일반인 객실이 아니라서.
일반인이라고 했어요, 지금 나한테? Oh my god.
If you want the single life stated as a philosophy rather than an accident, listen to Kim Hye-soo. At 55, she's an outright legend of Korean screen and one of the most refreshingly direct voices anywhere on the subject. She said plainly that she doesn't consider marriage essential, that she's happy and fulfilled on her own terms. She once assumed, like everyone around her, that it was simply the next step until she got older, kept working, and realized she'd built a life she loved exactly as it was. She talks about the freedom of answering to no one, of pouring herself fully into a role without a household to balance against it. Rather than framing single life as something she settled for, she treats it as something she chose with her eyes wide open. To a whole generation of fans, she's become an icon for precisely that, living proof that you can have a towering career, complete independence, and not one word of apology. Kim Hye-soo chose the single life out loud. This beloved veteran never announced anything. The country simply assumed she was a wife and mother because she'd played one so many times.
화난 게 아니라 어디 아픈 거니? 어?
네, 아파요.
When Kim Hee-jung, 55, finally set the record straight, the truth caught people off guard. And then it moved them. A veteran of some 35 years, she's so associated with warm, motherly roles that fans took her marriage for granted. On a variety show, she cleared it up in a single sentence. She's never married. And the reason people keep misreading her is the part that lands. She's raising her late brother's 2 children as her own, the 2 of them 10 years apart. Out with her nephew, strangers assume he's her husband. Out with her niece, they assume she's her daughter, and she's learned to just smile and let the misunderstanding pass. There's a quiet devotion in that, stepping in as a parent when life asked her to, with no wedding and no plan, just love. Kim Hee-jung built a family without ever marrying. The woman at the very top built an entire legend without one, and wouldn't have it any other way.
어제면 뉴스 봤잖아요. 영화제에서 여우주연상 받은 거. 최연소로.
So how did Uhm Jung-hwa, 56, become one of the most iconic figures in the industry while saying plainly that she has never once in her life felt like getting married? Korea's Madonna, they call her. Decades of hits across music and film, and she's fully in on the irony, having starred in a film literally titled Marriage is a Crazy Thing, and a drama called He Who Can't Marry, before admitting with a laugh that she's never felt the pull herself. Her life's purpose, as she put it, was never marriage, it was the work. She earned that ease the hard way, coming back to sing after a health scare many feared would end her career. A brush with mortality that, she said, only sharpened her sense of how she wants to spend her time. And she isn't closed off to the idea either. Asked whether she'd be sad if her closest unmarried friend married, she said she'd be happy for her, then admitted she rather likes that they're both still free. That's the quiet thread running through all 18 of them. Some stayed single for the work, some for the freedom. One is quietly, deeply in love without a certificate to prove it. And at least one simply never felt she was missing a thing. So tell me, which of them surprised you the most? And who did we leave off? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you'd rather see the love stories that did go the distance, click the video on your screen for the K-drama couples still together in 2026. Proof that in this industry, some love really does last.